I never imagined that the word family could feel like a door slamming shut. The message came on a quiet Tuesday morning while I was watering the plants in my kitchen window. The sun was soft, the air still, and for a moment, everything felt ordinary. My phone buzzed on the counter. I wiped my hands on a towel and picked it up, smiling when I saw Matthew's name. The smile didn't last. "You won't be joining us on the cruise. Emily thinks it's better if it's just immediate family." I read it twice, 3 times. My eyes kept catching on the same words. Just immediate family. My thumb hovered over the screen. I waited for the second message, the one that would explain it, soften it, turn it into some misunderstanding. It came. "Hope you understand, Mom. It's simpler this way." Simpler. The kitchen felt colder. The house felt unfamiliar, like I was standing in someone else's life. I stared at the word Mom in his message and wondered when it had stopped meaning anything. I typed one word back. Okay. That was all. But inside me, something cracked. I had given them that house 6 months ago, fully paid, no mortgage, no debt. Every penny of it earned over decades of careful saving, of saying no to luxuries, of clipping coupons and working overtime and telling myself it would all be worth it when my son had had a better life than I did. When Matthew was little, he used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. He'd press his face into my shoulder and whisper, "You'll always protect me, right?" I always said yes. I kept that promise. I just never realized I'd need protection from him one day. The house had been my idea. They were struggling with rent, with student loans, with credit cards that Emily said had gotten out of hand. They came to dinner one night looking tired and defeated. Matthew kept rubbing the back of his neck the way he did when he felt embarrassed. "We're just trying to figure things out," he'd said. I looked at him and saw the boy who used to build crooked birdhouses in the backyard. The boy who cried when our old dog died. The boy who once told me I was his hero, and I made the decision before they even asked. "I'll buy you a house," I said. Emily's eyes had filled with tears so quickly it almost looked practiced. "Oh, Olivia," she breathed, "you don't have to do that." But she didn't say no. The weeks that followed were a blur of paperwork and excitement. I found the perfect place, a 2-story home in a quiet neighborhood with a wide porch and a maple tree in the front yard. Emily loved the open kitchen. Matthew loved the garage. I loved the idea of Sunday dinners there, of grandchildren running down the hallway, of being welcome without asking. At the housewarming party, Emily hugged me tightly. "You'll always have a room here," she said. I believed her. I painted the guest bedroom myself, soft cream walls, lavender curtains because she said it was calming. I bought new dishes for their cabinets, stocked their pantry, even paid for the landscaping so the yard would look perfect. I told myself I was investing in love. Now, I understood. I had been financing my own exclusion. After the cruise message, the silence in my home felt louder than ever. I walked from room to room, touching things I'd bought with a sense of detachment. The dining table, the sofa, the framed photos of vacations I had paid for. Disneyland when Matthew was 10, Cancun when he and Emily got engaged. The cabin trip last Christmas. In every picture I was smiling. In none of them did I look necessary. That night I couldn't sleep. The word family kept circling my mind like a vulture. Just immediate family. What was I then? An outsider with a checkbook. At 2 a.m, I sat up in bed and reached for my laptop. Emily had insisted on helping manage my online accounts after my husband died. It's just easier. Olivia, she'd said gently, you shouldn't stress over numbers. I had trusted her. I logged in. At first, everything looked normal. Then I started scrolling. Small transfers, 200 here, 500 there, labeled as home upgrades or property maintenance. I frowned. I hadn't approved any maintenance. I clicked deeper. The transfers were linked to a secondary card. Emily's name. My heart began to pound. I opened my retirement account. There it was again, larger amounts this time, thousands labeled as contractor deposits. My breath grew shallow. I hadn't authorized any contractors. My hands trembled as I clicked through transaction histories going back months. It was methodical, careful, small enough not to draw attention, large enough to accumulate. They weren't just excluding me from a cruise. They were bleeding me. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen until the numbers blurred. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't confusion. This was theft wrapped in politeness. The next morning, I called my financial advisor. Just a routine review, I said calmly. He pulled up my file. Everything appears stable. He began, then paused. Although there have been several recent fund transfers. Authorized by whom? I asked. Your secondary account holder, Mrs. Emily Gardner. Under the power of attorney you signed last spring. The memory hit me like a slap. Emily had brought the paperwork over one afternoon. It's just in case of emergencies, she'd said. If anything ever happens, I can help. I had signed without reading every line. I had trusted her. Now that trust was weaponized. I thanked my advisor and hung up. I didn't cry. Something colder settled in instead. I called an attorney that afternoon. I didn't tell Matthew. I didn't tell Emily. I sat across from the lawyer, placed the bank statements on his desk, and said quietly, I want everything locked down. He read through the papers, his expression darkening. They've been positioning themselves, he said finally. For what? I asked. For control. The word tasted bitter. He explained my options. Revoking power of attorney, freezing accounts, reversing the property transfer if fraud could be demonstrated. It won't be simple, he warned. Neither is betrayal, I replied. The paperwork began that week, quietly, methodically. They left for their cruise 3 days later. Matthew texted a photo from the deck, him and Emily smiling against a blue ocean backdrop. Wish you were here, he wrote. I stared at the picture. I wondered if he felt even a flicker of guilt, or if I had become so secondary in his life that my absence barely registered. While they sipped cocktails and watched sunsets, I sat in conference rooms. We gathered evidence, every unauthorized transaction, every forged authorization, every document Emily had slipped under my door the day they left, papers granting her permanent control over my finances and medical decisions. If I had signed them, she would have owned my life. The attorney filed the fraud report. He initiated the reversal of the house transfer on grounds of financial abuse. We moved fast. The buyer came quicker than expected. A young couple paying in cash, clean sale, expedited closing. The house that had cost me my savings was sold while my son stood on a cruise ship balcony believing it was his forever home. I moved into a modest apartment across town. Small, quiet, mine, no grand staircase, no maple tree, but no manipulation either. The day their cruise docked, I parked a block away from the house. I stood across the street as their car pulled into the driveway. They stepped out laughing. Emily was mid-sentence when she saw the moving trucks. Her smile vanished. Matthew looked confused. Then the real estate agent stepped forward to greet the new owners. Emily's voice rose first. "What is this?" I crossed the street slowly. Matthew saw me and blinked. "Mom, what's going on?" I stopped a few feet away. "The house has been sold," I said calmly. Emily stared at me like I'd spoken another language. "You can't sell our house." "It was never yours," I replied. Matthew's face went pale as I handed him the folder. He flipped through the documents. The reversal, the fraud evidence, the account statements. "Mom," his voice cracked. Emily snatched the papers from him. "This won't hold up," she snapped. "We had agreements." "Yes," I said quietly. "We did." Her jaw tightened. "You're overreacting to theft," I asked. Matthew looked at her. "What did you do?" She glared at him. "Don't start." I watched them fracture in real time. "You said I wasn't family." I told my son softly. "Family doesn't steal. Family doesn't try to take control of someone's life while smiling at them over dinner." He looked down. "I'm sorry," he whispered. I felt something inside me soften and then steady. "Sorry doesn't rebuild trust," I said. "And trust is the only thing you ever really had from me." Emily's voice shook with anger. "You'll end up alone." I smiled. "I'd rather be alone than used." I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. That night, my phone buzzed repeatedly. "Please talk to me." "This isn't what I wanted." She pushed for it. Excuses. Deflections. Too late. I placed the phone face down and stepped onto my small balcony. The city lights flickered gently in the distance. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt light. Not because I had won, but because I had stopped losing. I thought about the boy who once asked me to protect him from thunderstorms. I had kept that promise. Now I was keeping one to myself. Quiet doesn't mean weak. Sometimes it means watching. Sometimes it means preparing. And sometimes it means walking away without a single tear left to give. I stood there breathing in the cool night air and finally understood something simple and undeniable. Family is not who you finance. Family is who protects you when you're not looking. And if they don't, you protect yourself. The next morning, I started packing the last of my things from what had been my childhood home, the one I had lived in with my late husband. Every drawer, every cabinet, every corner held memories. And yet, for the first time, they felt like mine again. No one else had a claim on them. No one else could manipulate them. I found a box of old letters tied with a ribbon, handwritten notes from Matthew when he was little. "I love you. Mommy, you're my hero. Don't ever let go of me." I held them close, feeling the weight of the years and the betrayal all at once. It hurt, yes, but it also reminded me that love, even when misused, had shaped me into someone who could endure. The apartment I had moved into was small, but it was filled with light. I arranged the furniture with care, placed my favorite books on the shelves, and added a vase of fresh flowers on the table. There were no luxuries, no grandiose designs, but there was peace, and after months of anxiety, that was everything. I didn't hear from Matthew or Emily for a week. The silence was heavy at first, but I came to appreciate it. I started walking through the neighborhood, finding a small coffee shop that became mine, a quiet park where I could sit under the trees and think. I even took up painting again, something I hadn't done since before my husband's death. Each brushstroke felt like reclaiming a piece of my life. Then, one afternoon, As I was arranging my newly planted window garden, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Matthew. My heart skipped, but I didn't answer immediately. I watched the flowers swaying gently in the breeze, reminding myself that I had survived worse storms than a call from an estranged son. Finally, I picked up. "Mom," he said, his voice trembling. "Can we talk?" I took a deep breath. "Why can't?" I said softly. "But I need you to understand something first. Family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't try to control someone's life. I loved you both enough to give everything I could, and that love doesn't mean you can use me." There was a long pause. I could hear the hum of a street nearby, the distant laughter of children playing. Finally, Matthew spoke again, voice low and broken. And I didn't realize I was wrong. I thought you were just being dramatic, that you didn't understand us. But Emily, she pushed me too far. I didn't stand up to her, and I let things happen. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Acknowledging it is the first step, but actions matter more than words. "I want to make it right," he said. "I'll do whatever it takes." I felt a strange mixture of relief and caution. "I hope so, Matthew, but understand, rebuilding trust isn't quick, and it's not guaranteed. You have to show me, not tell me, that you value me and respect me." "I will," he promised. The call ended, and I leaned back in my chair. The sky outside was fading into gold as the sun dipped lower. For the first time in months, I felt like the air was mine to breathe freely. Days turned into weeks. Matthew started showing up, not intrusively, but consistently. He helped with small things in the apartment, apologized in ways that weren't performative, and slowly, carefully, began to rebuild a bridge he had once burned. Emily, on the other hand, never called. She was a reminder of the choices people make when they put greed before love. I realized that sometimes protecting yourself isn't just about stopping others. It's about giving yourself permission to live fully again. I took trips I had postponed, started volunteering at a local community center, and reconnected with friends I had drifted from while caught up in family drama. One evening, as I sat painting the skyline from my balcony, Matthew came over. He didn't bring gifts or apologies, just himself. We sat together in silence for a while, watching the city lights come alive. "I'm sorry for everything," he said finally, voice quiet. I didn't respond immediately. I simply looked at him, at the young man he had become, and thought about the boy who had once crawled into my bed during thunderstorms. "Matthew," I said softly, "I've learned something. Family isn't about blood. It's about trust. And it's about love that doesn't have conditions." He nodded, tears in his eyes. "And if you want this to work," I continued, "we have to start over, slowly, honestly, with respect. Can you do that?" "Yes," he whispered. "I can." I reached out and touched his hand. It was tentative at first, then firmer. The past couldn't be erased, but it could be acknowledged, and from that acknowledgement, something new could grow. I smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile, and felt the tension inside me finally ease. I had lost a lot, yes, but I had gained clarity, strength, and a renewed sense of self. I was no longer just a giver of homes, a caretaker, or a victim of manipulation. I was the guardian of my own heart, the keeper of my peace, and the author of the next chapter of my life. That night, I went to bed knowing that no matter what happened next, I had chosen myself, and that, in the end, was the most powerful thing of all. The following morning, I woke with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. The apartment was quiet, sunlight spilling across the small kitchen table where I had been sorting through letters and notes from Matthew's childhood. I sat there sipping my tea, remembering how small he had once been, how his scraped knees had always led him to me. That child was gone, replaced by someone who had let greed and influence cloud his judgment. But perhaps, just perhaps, he could return to being my son. I spent the morning making calls, not frantic, not desperate, calm, measured, deliberate. I spoke with Dalton first, checking on the status of the house reversal and the account freezes. Everything was in place. Every legal loophole they might try to exploit was sealed. The private investigator had delivered a thorough report, cataloging every suspicious transaction Emily had executed. It was meticulous, cold, factual, and entirely in my favor. Next, I called a few close friends who had supported me quietly through the ordeal. Their voices were comforting, grounding. Martha's laughter rang through the phone, warm and familiar. "Liv," she said, "I told you, one day they'll realize the lioness they tried to corner isn't just a bedtime story. She's real and she's awake." I smiled, feeling a flicker of lightness I hadn't known in months. By mid-morning, Matthew arrived at the apartment. He didn't knock or announce himself. He just appeared at the door, hesitant but steady. I opened it and gestured for him to come in. The air between us was tentative, heavy with unspoken apologies. "Mom," he began, voice shaking slightly. "I know I can't undo what happened, but I want to try. I don't want to lose you." I let his words hang in the room. I studied his face, searching for the boy I had once known. There was still a trace of him there, buried beneath layers of arrogance, of influence, of being molded by Emily's ambition. "Matthew," I said slowly, "you've got a lot to prove. Love doesn't come with a free pass. It comes with respect, and respect is earned, not assumed." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I understand. I'll do whatever it takes. I know I hurt you more than I realized." For a moment, I felt the old maternal instinct stir, the urge to hug him, to forgive him automatically. But I held myself back. Forgiveness wasn't immediate. It wasn't automatic. It had to be rebuilt, slowly, carefully. Actions speak louder than words. I reminded him, "Show me you can be trustworthy. Show me you can prioritize our relationship over convenience or gain. Then maybe we can talk about rebuilding." He swallowed, nodding again, and there was a quiet understanding that we were beginning something new. A tentative truce built on awareness rather than blind trust. Over the next few days, I immersed myself in my reclaimed life. I revisited old hobbies, explored the city streets, and reacquainted myself with the world outside the confines of my manipulated household. I painted again, each brushstroke a reclamation of my identity, of my time, of my spirit. I volunteered at a local community center, helping elderly women navigate finances safely, sharing the lessons I had learned the hard way. Each smile, each thankful glance reminded me that my energy had value beyond the reach of those who had sought to exploit it. Then one evening, as the city lights flickered on, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea and watched the horizon darken. My phone buzzed, a text from Matthew. "Mom, can we have dinner tomorrow? Just us." I smiled softly. "Yes," I replied, "just us." That night, I reflected on how different life had become. The house that had once been a monument to my giving was no longer a weapon against me. The money that had been siphoned quietly was safely secured. Emily's schemes were documented, ready to protect me if needed. And I, for the first time in years, felt like the master of my own destiny. The next morning, Matthew arrived punctually. He didn't bring gifts or excuses, just himself. We cooked together in the small kitchen, laughing at our mishaps, sharing stories of our day, finding joy in the mundane. Conversation flowed naturally without manipulation or obligation. The boy I had known was not fully restored, but the man before me was willing to learn, to make amends, to grow. Days turned into weeks. Matthew consistently showed up, small acts building trust where deceit had once reigned. I observed, cautious but open, measuring each gesture, each decision. He learned that love required more than words, and I learned that forgiveness was possible even after betrayal, but it required boundaries, vigilance, and respect. Emily never returned to my life. She was a stark reminder that not all bonds could be repaired, that some people prioritize gain over connection. But her absence was liberating. Without her influence, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't experienced in decades. Through it all, I realized that my strength had been there all along. The years of giving, of sacrificing, of being manipulated had forged a resilience that was unbreakable. I had survived betrayal, theft, and the quiet cruelty of those I loved most. And in surviving, I had discovered my true power, not in retaliation, but in reclaiming my life and refusing to be diminished again. One evening, as I walked through the park near my apartment, I paused under the old oak tree, the one where Richard had once sat reading, the one that had been a sanctuary for us. I breathed deeply, feeling the breeze on my face, listening to the laughter of children playing nearby. For the first time, the future seemed full of possibility, untainted by fear or manipulation. I whispered softly, more to myself than anyone else, quiet doesn't mean weak. And now I am free. Matthew walked up behind me. He didn't speak at first, simply stood beside me, sharing the quiet moment. Then he said softly, I want to be better, Mom. I want us to be better. I turned to him and smiled, the smile genuine and unguarded. Then show me, I said simply, every day in every way. And for the first time in a long time, I believed that love, true love, grounded in respect and trust, could grow again. Slowly, carefully, but it could grow. Over the next few weeks, life settled into a rhythm I hadn't known I craved. I woke each morning with clarity, no longer carrying the weight of deceit and betrayal. My apartment, modest and familiar, felt like a sanctuary rather than a temporary refuge. I moved through it with confidence, arranging things not for anyone else's comfort, but for my own. Each small adjustment, a new vase here, a book on the shelf there, was a quiet declaration. This space belonged to me, and I would no longer let it serve as a stage for someone else's schemes. Matthew continued to visit, slowly earning back the trust he had once taken for granted. At first, I kept a close eye, watching for signs of manipulation or pretense. But day by day, he began to show subtle changes. He asked for advice. He listened without immediately defending himself. And he even began helping around the apartment, not because I asked, but because he genuinely wanted to contribute. One evening, as we sat at my small dining table, Matthew said, almost hesitantly, I know I can't undo what Emily did or what I allowed, but I want you to know I'm serious about making things right. I met his gaze, steady and calm. It's a start, I said simply, but actions matter more than words. He nodded, understanding the weight behind my statement. Over dinner, we shared stories, not about the past, but about our present lives. The conversation was simple, ordinary, yet profoundly healing. I realized that the ordinary moments were what I had been missing all along: the quiet laughter, the shared meals, the feeling of being truly seen without expectation or agenda. Meanwhile, I continued to strengthen my independence. I met regularly with Dalton, ensuring that all financial protections remained in place. I reviewed my accounts daily, not out of paranoia, but out of self-respect. Every transaction, every document was carefully scrutinized. The private investigators' reports provided reassurance and a sense of control I hadn't felt in years. I was no longer at the mercy of others' greed. I was the steward of my own life. The legal reversal of the house had given me more than property. It had given me proof of my own power. I began attending seminars on elder financial abuse, speaking to other women who had been taken advantage of by those they trusted. Sharing my story, I realized, was another form of reclamation. By turning my experience into guidance for others, I transformed my pain into purpose. Matthew's growth was slow but steady. He started taking initiative in his own life, making decisions without immediately relying on Emily's influence. He sought my counsel on financial matters, asking questions rather than assuming he knew better. And over time, I felt the boy I had once known, the curious, bright-eyed child, peeking through the adult he had become. It was a fragile emergence, but it gave me hope. I also began reconnecting with old friends and acquaintances I had drifted from over the years, caught up in family obligations and misplaced loyalty. Martha became a constant companion, her presence a reminder that support and solidarity existed outside of bloodlines. Together, we laughed, shared stories, and plotted quiet adventures, reclaiming the joy that had been buried beneath years of manipulation and expectation. One afternoon, as I walked through the park, I saw families enjoying picnics, children running freely, couples holding hands. The sight stirred memories, both painful and comforting. I paused beneath the oak tree, tracing the bark with my fingers, thinking of Richard and the life we had built together. I whispered to the empty air, I am free, I am enough, and I will never let anyone diminish me again. Matthew arrived shortly after. Sitting beside me silently, we watched the children play, the world moving in its unhurried rhythm. Then he spoke softly, almost a whisper, Mom, I want to rebuild our relationship step by step. I know I can't erase the past, but I want to try. Please let me try. I turned to him, feeling the weight of years behind me and the potential of years ahead. You have to earn it, I said, voice steady. Not because you owe me, but because respect must be mutual. If we do this, it will be together on honest terms. He nodded, a flicker of relief passing across his face. I understand. In the following months, our relationship continued to evolve. I allowed him into my life carefully, setting boundaries and insisting on transparency. Each interaction, each shared experience was a building block for a bond that was stronger than what had existed before. The bond was now founded on trust, not obligation, on respect, not expectation, on love, not convenience. Emily, meanwhile, faded from the picture. I heard from mutual acquaintances that she had moved on, continuing her schemes elsewhere. Her absence was a gift, a reminder that not all relationships are worth preserving. Some must end so that others can flourish. I also began taking time for myself, exploring passions I had set aside for decades. Painting, reading, volunteering, and traveling in small, deliberate ways, all of it became part of reclaiming the life I had nearly lost to manipulation. Every new experience was a declaration: I am alive, I am whole, I am sovereign over my own existence. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I stood on my balcony overlooking the city. The breeze carried the faint laughter of children in the streets below, and the lights of distant buildings twinkled like stars brought down to earth. I felt a profound sense of peace. The fear, the betrayal, the manipulation, all of it was behind me. What remained was clarity, power, and a quiet joy that had nothing to do with anyone else's approval. Matthew joined me, leaning against the railing. He didn't speak, and I didn't need him to. We shared the silence, a comfortable mutual acknowledgement of the past and the future. After a long moment, he said quietly, "Thank you, Mom, for everything, for giving me a chance to see who I really am and who I want to be." I smiled softly, the city lights reflecting in my eyes. "Thank yourself, Matthew. The choice to change has to come from you. I can only guide, protect, and love. The rest is yours." As night fully descended, I realized that I had not only reclaimed my life, but I had also reclaimed myself. Quiet had not been weakness, it had been preparation, patience, observation, vigilance, and finally action had transformed what once seemed like helplessness into empowerment. The house, the money, the betrayal, they were all part of a story that ended not in loss, but in reclamation and clarity. And in that quiet moment, under the stars, I whispered to the world and to myself, I am free, I am strong, I am enough, and I will never again be underestimated. Over the next few days, I moved deliberately, my steps measured, my mind sharp. Each morning began with reviewing my accounts again, ensuring no unauthorized activity had occurred while I slept. I called Dalton daily, not out of paranoia, but out of necessity. This was my life, my money, my home. I would no longer let anyone, even my own son, treat it as theirs to manipulate. I scheduled a follow-up with the private investigator, asking for a full report on any lingering financial irregularities. He arrived mid-morning, briefcase in hand, and we spent hours combing through every account, every transfer, every credit line that Emily had touched. Each page told a story of subtle deceit, months of manipulation disguised as helpfulness, small withdrawals hidden under benign labels, pre-approved loans taken without disclosure. It was meticulous, frightening in its detail, and yet in facing it head on, I felt a growing sense of power. By evening, I knew exactly what I was up against, and I knew exactly how to protect myself. Dalton had begun drafting new legal safeguards, including irrevocable trust structures, account freezes, and protective clauses that would prevent any future attempts at coercion or theft. Every step was carefully considered, every move calculated to ensure that Matthew and Emily could no longer use my kindness against me. The calm of my apartment contrasted sharply with the storm I imagined raging back at the house I had once gifted. I pictured the moment they would return from their cruise, expecting to resume control, only to find doors locked, accounts frozen, and their schemes exposed. I allowed myself a small, private smile. For years, I had let them take, manipulate, and exploit. Not anymore. I began documenting everything: emails, messages, conversations, and every interaction that had even the slightest hint of coercion. This was no longer just about reclaiming property or finances. This was about creating a record that could not be disputed, a shield against any attempt to undermine me. Each note I typed was precise, factual, unemotional. The pain and betrayal had been processed. What remained was action. Matthew eventually reached out again, asking to meet at a neutral location. I agreed, knowing that this was part of the long game, observing, testing, and understanding the intentions behind his words. When we met at a quiet cafe, I watched him carefully. He seemed smaller somehow, the arrogance replaced with hesitation, the entitlement tempered by the weight of reality. "I want to make things right," he said, voice low. "I know I've let you down. I want to rebuild your trust, step by step." I nodded slowly. Actions matter more than words. Matthew, this isn't about forgiveness. It's about accountability. Prove that you understand what you did and that you are willing to change. He met my gaze, determination flickering in his eyes. "I will. I promise." Outside the cafe, the city moved unaware of the quiet power struggle unfolding within its streets. I realized then that the life I had been living, reactive, self-effacing, always accommodating, was over. From now on, I would live proactively, decisively, and fully aware of my own worth. In the following weeks, I began repairing other areas of my life that had been neglected while I focused on family obligations. Old friends, hobbies, and passions that had been set aside were slowly reintegrated. I joined a book club, began attending local art workshops, and even started planning small trips, allowing myself to enjoy life for the first time in decades. Dalton and I finalized all protective legal measures. My accounts were secured, all unauthorized powers revoked, and my estate structured in a way that would prevent future exploitation. The private investigator's report was thorough and documented everything Emily had attempted, ensuring that if she challenged me, her deceit would be irrefutable. And then came the day they returned from their cruise. I was prepared, calm, and entirely in control. Their arrival was met with locked doors, movers unloading furniture for the new owners, and a calm, unshakable statement from me. The house was no longer theirs. Emily's reaction was instant: panic, fury, disbelief. But I did not waver. Matthew's face mirrored a mixture of fear and understanding, the consequences of their choices finally settling on him. I let the silence stretch, allowing the weight of their actions to sink in fully. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm but unyielding. "You gambled with my trust, my home, and my money you lost. No more explanations, no more negotiations, no more apologies needed. The future, my future, was secure."